Hi, and welcome to week 5. This is my multimedia PowerPoint. My name is Brianna Reeves, and I'm going to be talking about change. So in this PowerPoint, we're going to discuss federalism, dual federalism, and cooperative federalism, and the differences in the two, and which I believe is either more beneficial, if any are beneficial to our government. So federalism is a system of government in which power is divided between national or federal and state. So with this division, national, or what I will be referring to it as federal government, they are in charge of declaring war, the set standards for weights and measurements. They were actually also the ones that established and run the National Post Office. They print money, and they also enter into treaties with foreign governments. And then the states, their more involvement is, or they are regulating and establishing schools. They issue marriage and driver's license. They establish local governments, and they assume powers not delegated to the national government. And what that does is it's very, the state is in charge of what the state is either benefiting from or needs improvements, and it's all on the state. They don't dip into, they don't touch the national. They're two very separate sides that do not engage in each other whatsoever. And then we have, with population growing, change needed to be made. It became dual federalism, and also this is also known as the layered cake federalism, and that is a politician arrangement in which power is divided between federal and state governments in clearly defined terms, with the state government exercising those powers accorded to them without interference from the federal government. And what this is stating is that it's very cut and dry. State is designed to do and regulate, X, Y, and Z, and then federal. And what this is ultimately to have peace between the two, but also continue to grow with the growing of the United States. It's better to allow the state to kind of, you can do what you want and I'll do what I want, and there's no interfering of the two. And then we have cooperative federalism, which is basically, instead of it being very cut and dry like the layered cake as previously stated, now it's more of a marble cake. There's going to be the state, possibly because of the Great Depression, they need to rely on federal funding. So they're going to say, the national government will say, hey, I'll give you these funds to help with your schooling, but in return, I need a standardized curriculum. There's no more of you can do whatever you want because you need my help. And this was more of Morton Grodzins theory, where it's very mesh. You can't have a cut and dry because, for example, medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. We have certain states that it's legal to use medical marijuana recreationally, and then there's other states that you could only use it for medical purposes, and then there's some states that it's not. You can't. It's still prohibited, which is, if you look up federal laws, the use of marijuana is still prohibited. So this is where it becomes gray, because here we have agencies like local law enforcement that still go off of and practice off of federal laws. So yes, in the state of California, we can recreationally use marijuana, but if you are going to be applying for a government job, you cannot use either recreationally or for medical reasons. And this is where you get kind of the gray areas. So here's my view on the different types of federalism. I personally believe that the federal government does need to be held at a higher standard, and they need to have more control, and states do need to they can't just go their own way. I know it does state in the Constitution that the federal government will not impose on the states, but when we are using federal funding or the federal government gives so much to the states, they do need to kind of follow in the same guidelines as the federal government. So an example of this is the state of California newly being a sanctuary state. At what point is our president going to pull federal funding? Because here we're going to be funding these schools that are open to any children that live here, whether they're citizens or not, and or healthcare, things like that. But yet the federal government is putting into these funds and giving these funds, but they're saying, no, we need to get a hold of our immigration and we need to not have open borders and not have sanctuary states where these people are protected. Yes, if you want to come over here legally, you must do it the right way. And that's what ultimately the federal government is trying to get a hold of currently. So I personally think that if we're going to be getting handouts, then we kind of need to stay in the same area of where the federal government is going. For example, if I'm constantly giving my children money and I'm telling them, no, you can't do this, and they go and do it anyways, but then they still want funding and money and new clothes and things like that, I'm going to be like, wait a minute, everything I'm telling you not to do, you guys are choosing to do. Um, so that's kind of my view on federalism and how I believe the governments should be ran. And here are my references I used for the PowerPoint and also the writing assignment for this week. The 2 YouTube videos that were posted in our lecture this week were hilarious. I felt like a child like laughing at them, but they really put into perspective the differences in federalism. So that's my PowerPoint for this week. I apologize for it being late. I have been in Europe and internet, cell phone service, everything has been extremely limited. But I will be back in the States on Tuesday and hopefully everything will be caught up and good to go. So Tush from Germany.